Welcome back to Biblical Wisdom. Let's move to the next part of our journey through the book of Proverbs. If you've been with us from the beginning, you've witnessed something powerful. We've completed our deep dive into Proverbs chapters 1 through 9, exploring the profound introduction of wisdom and folly. We've seen Lady Wisdom calling out in the streets, we've understood the value of discipline, and we've learned to fear the Lord as the beginning of knowledge. But today marks a significant turning point in our series. A new chapter begins starting with chapter 10. We enter a completely different section of Proverbs, the instructions of King Solomon. While the first 9 chapters gave us extended teachings and lengthy discourses, what lies ahead is something beautifully unique. We're about to encounter bite-sized nuggets of divine wisdom, practical truths that cut straight to the heart of daily living. These aren't just ancient words. They're timeless principles that speak directly to the choices you'll make today, the conversations you'll have tomorrow, and the character you're building for a lifetime. Navigate your way. We know everyone's journey with wisdom is personal. That's why we've included timestamps in the video description below. Feel free to jump to the sections that speak most to your current season. Whether you're wrestling with work ethics, relationships, finances, or integrity, there's wisdom here for you. Join the mission. If this video adds value to your pursuit of wisdom, hit that like button. It's not just for us, it's so this message can reach more hearts hungry for biblical truth. Wisdom grows when it's shared, and your engagement helps spread these life-changing principles to others seeking guidance. So grab your Bible, open your heart, and let's discover together what King Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, has to teach us about living skillfully in God's world. Let's dive in. Section I, the Great Transition and the Structural Genius. We're dismantling one of the most influential ethical blueprints ever assembled. Proverbs Chapter 10. If you think this is just a random list of wise sayings, you're missing the architectural genius. This chapter marks a pivotal shift, the moment abstract philosophy crystallizes into practical, actionable law for living. The first 9 chapters of Proverbs are a philosophical overture. They're discursive, narrative, a father's passionate plea to my son to embrace wisdom herself. They paint wisdom as a woman calling out in the streets, as a tree of life, as the master craftsman present at creation. These chapters build a worldview, a framework for understanding reality itself. But at chapter 10, the music changes. The long speeches end. The extended metaphors conclude. We enter the core, the first great collection of the Proverbs of Solomon. Here, wisdom is no longer just a person to pursue. She's broken down into hundreds of discrete, time-tested axioms. This is where folk wisdom meets royal insight, condensed for maximum impact. Imagine Solomon having surveyed thousands of court cases, observed countless human dramas, and reflected on the patterns of human behavior, now distilling everything into these compact, memorable statements. The literary architecture, the genius of this chapter, is its primary literary engine, antithetical parallelism. Nearly every verse is a 2-line unit where the first line defines a virtue and the second slams it against its vicious opposite. Take verse 1, a wise son makes a glad father, but a foolish son is a sorrow to his mother. Or verse 4, a slack hand causes poverty, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. He who gathers in summer is a prudent son, but he who sleeps in harvest is a son who brings shame. This isn't just poetic flair, this is a pedagogical masterstroke. By constantly juxtaposing opposites, life versus death, wealth versus poverty, security versus ruin, the text engraves a fundamental truth into our consciousness. The universe operates on a system of moral causality. Choices have reliable, predictable consequences. It's not chaos, it's not random. There's a grain to reality, and you can either work with it or against it. This structural repetition hammers home the point. Every moment is a fork in the road, and the path you choose determines your destination. Understanding the thematic clusters, it's the architecture of a moral universe. While these sayings are standalone gems, each one capable of standing on its own and providing complete wisdom, they cluster around critical areas of human life. The family foundation, where our moral journey begins and where our choices have their most immediate impact. Economic ethics, the morality of our work and wealth, addressing how we earn, spend, and think about material resources. The architecture of speech, perhaps the chapter's deepest theme, examining the power of words to create life or death. Divine justice and security, the long-term outcomes of a chosen path, and God's role in upholding the moral order. Let's walk through this blueprint verse by verse, unpacking not just what these proverbs say, but why they matter for your life today. Section II, Family Integrity and Divine Management, the Foundation Stone. Family Impact, verse 1, it begins at home. A wise son makes a glad father, but a foolish son is a sorrow to his mother. This isn't just parenting advice. It grounds cosmic wisdom in the most tangible human reality, the family. Our choices aren't abstract philosophical exercises. They have an immediate emotional impact on those who love us most. The specific mention of the mother's sorrow is particularly poignant. It speaks to the deep, visceral grief of a child's deviation from the path of wisdom. Why does Solomon mention the mother specifically in connection with sorrow? Perhaps because mothers often carry the emotional weight of their children's choices more intensely. Or perhaps it's acknowledging the unique bond between mother and child. Either way, this verse reminds us that we don't live in isolation. Every moral choice we make sends ripples through our family system. Think about your own life. When you make wise decisions, when you show integrity, when you work hard, when you treat others with kindness, how does it affect your parents, your spouse, your children? Conversely, when you take shortcuts, when you compromise your values, when you choose foolishness, who bears the weight of that choice alongside you? The futility of shortcuts, verse 2, then comes a direct assault on our temptation for shortcuts. Treasures of wickedness profit nothing, but righteousness delivers from death. Ill-gotten gains, wealth from deceit or exploitation, money gained through unethical means, success built on a foundation of compromise. The text declares it ultimately worthless. Why? Because it exists outside the moral architecture. It will be blasted by the very order of things. We live in a culture obsessed with hacks, shortcuts, and get-rich-quick schemes. But Solomon, observing human nature over decades, declares that wealth gained through wickedness carries an inherent instability. It might look impressive temporarily, but it's built on sand. The counterforce is tzedakah, righteousness, not mere religious piety, but rock-solid integrity in your dealings. This, the proverb claims, provides a security that money can't buy. It delivers from death, not just physical death, but spiritual death, the death of character, the death of peace. Divine management of outcomes, verse 3 drives this home with an explicit theological claim. The Lord does not let the righteous go hungry, but he thwarts the craving of the wicked. This introduces the divine guarantor of the system. God actively manages outcomes. This isn't deism, a God who wound up the universe and walked away. This is a God intimately involved in the moral mechanics of reality. Now we need to be careful here. This isn't prosperity gospel. It's not claiming that righteous people never face hardship or that they'll always be financially comfortable. History and experience tell us otherwise, but what it is saying is this: God maintains a fundamental justice in the universe. The righteous may know need, may face temporary challenges, but they won't face ultimate famine, ultimate destruction. The wicked, their deepest cravings, their lust for unjust gain, their hunger for power obtained through oppression will be ultimately frustrated. The system is divinely upheld. The dynamics of work, verses 4-5, the text now turns to the practical realities of labor. Verse 4 states simply, "A slack hand causes poverty, but the hand of the diligent makes rich." This is the normative principle. Honest effort leads to provision. It's not complicated, it's not mystical, it's observational wisdom refined over generations. But verse 5 adds crucial nuance. He who gathers in summer is a prudent son, but he who sleeps in harvest is a son who brings shame. Wisdom isn't just hard work, it's timely work. It's understanding the season and acting accordingly. An agricultural society understood this implicitly. There's a time to plant, a time to water, and a time to harvest. Miss the harvest window and all your previous labor becomes worthless. The same principle applies across domains. There are seasons in business, seasons in relationships, seasons in education. The wise person reads the signs of the times and acts accordingly. The fool is asleep at the wheel during the crucial harvest, a failure with consequences not just for himself, but for his entire community who depends on his contribution. The nature of blessings and burdens, verse 6, blessings are on the head of the righteous, but the mouth of the wicked conceals violence. Notice the contrast, blessings versus concealed violence. The righteous receive visible favor, their character attracts blessing like a magnet, but the wicked, even when they speak, they're hiding violence. Their words themselves become weapons, tools of destruction disguised as normal conversation. This sets up one of the chapter's major themes, speech as diagnostic tool and moral instrument. We'll return to this, but notice how it's introduced here. Wickedness isn't just about action, it's about communication, about how we use words to either bless or curse, to reveal truth or conceal violence. Legacy and memory, verse 7, ultimately it's about legacy. The memory of the righteous is a blessing, but the name of the wicked will rot. In an honor-shame culture, which was Solomon's context and remains the context for much of the world today, your name was everything. Your lasting reputation. What people said when your name came up in conversation. How you were remembered after death. The righteous are remembered with honor, their influence a continuing blessing. Think of the people in history whose very names inspire us, whose character continues to speak even centuries after they lived. Their memory is literally a blessing to subsequent generations. The wicked, their name becomes a stinking, rotten thing, repulsive or worse, forgotten entirely. Have you noticed how history tends to remember villains with disgust or simply erases them from memory altogether? Your character is your final, lasting artifact. Everything else you accumulate, your wealth, your possessions, your achievements, will be distributed, forgot, or surpassed. But your character, that becomes your permanent legacy. Section III, Economic Ethics and Practical Living. The principle of diligent labor, verses 4-5 revisited. Chapter 10 is intensely practical about work, so let's dig deeper into what we've already touched on. Verse 4 again, a slack hand causes poverty, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. This challenges both extremes in our modern thinking. On one hand, it challenges the notion that poverty is always the result of systemic injustice beyond individual control. While systems certainly matter, this proverb asserts that personal initiative plays a crucial role. The person who consistently shirks responsibility, who takes the path of least resistance, who does the bare minimum, this person is building poverty into their future. On the other hand, it challenges the prosperity gospel notion that wealth is always a sign of divine favor. The proverb says diligence makes rich, not that righteousness automatically produces wealth. It's connecting cause and effect in the natural order, not promising supernatural intervention. Verse 5 adds that critical dimension of timing. He who gathers in summer is prudent. In our modern context, this might look like the student who actually does the reading during the semester rather than cramming the night before finals. The professional who develops skills before they're needed rather than scrambling when opportunity arrives. The person who saves money during times of plenty rather than waiting until crisis hits. The fool is asleep at the wheel during the crucial harvest, a failure with consequences for himself and his community. In a subsistence agricultural economy, one family's failure to harvest affected the entire village. Your laziness wasn't just your problem, it was everyone's problem. The paradox of wealth, verses 15-16. Here's a moment of stark realism. Verse 15, a rich man's wealth is his strong city, the poverty of the poor is their ruin. Wait, this is supposed to be teaching that righteousness is better than wealth. And here it is, acknowledging wealth's real, practical power for security. This is the Bible's unflinching honesty. Money does provide advantages. Wealth does open doors. Financial resources do create a buffer against disaster. But notice, the text immediately holds this in tension with the overarching moral message. Verse 16 contrasts not the possession of wealth, but the outcome of different kinds of gain. The wage of the righteous leads to life, the gain of the wicked to sin. Righteous gain, money earned through ethical means, through honest labor, through fair dealing, promotes flourishing. It creates stability, enables generosity, provides for family. Wicked gain, money obtained through exploitation, deceit, or oppression, fuels deeper corruption. It's food and fuel for his lusts. It finances further wickedness. It becomes a tool for expanding oppression. The money itself is morally neutral, but it takes on the character of how it was obtained and how it's used. The moral vector matters infinitely more than the amount. Divine blessing and true prosperity. Verse 22 gives us the theological capstone to this economic discussion. The blessing of the Lord makes rich, and he adds no sorrow to it. True, untarnished prosperity flows from alignment with God, often through diligent and ethical work. It's pure, there's no guilt attached, no skeletons in the closet, no midnight anxiety about being discovered, no damage to relationships, no moral compromise haunting your conscience. Compare this to wealth gained through unethical means. It might look identical in a bank statement, but experientially it's completely different. The person who cuts corners, who exploits others, who builds wealth on a foundation of compromise, they carry sorrow with their success. The anxiety of being found out, the erosion of relationships, the internal knowledge that they've betrayed their own values. God's blessing produces wealth that you can enjoy without sorrow, success that you can celebrate without shame. The social cost of laziness, verse 26. The critique of laziness reaches its peak in verse 26 with genius imagery. Like vinegar to the teeth and smoke to the eyes, so is the sluggard to those who send him. Pause and experience these metaphors. Vinegar to the teeth, that sharp, unpleasant sensation that makes you wince. Smoke to the eyes, the burning, watering irritation that you can't escape. These aren't just mild annoyances, they're active discomforts that demand your attention and ruin your experience. This isn't just about personal failure. The sluggard is a social toxin. They cause active discomfort, irritation, and inefficiency to everyone around them. Your coworker who doesn't pull their weight, forcing you to pick up their slack. The family member who won't contribute to household responsibilities. The employee who forces their manager to constantly supervise and correct. In this moral universe, sloth isn't a private vice, it's a communal affliction. Your laziness doesn't just harm you, it inflicts suffering on everyone who has to work around you, compensate for you, or depend on you. Section IV, the architecture of speech. We now reach the heart of the chapter and one of the Bible's deepest meditations, the power of speech. Over a dozen verses dissect the tongue, lips, and mouth. Why this intense focus? Because speech is the most immediate output of the heart and the primary tool for building or destroying community. The fountain and the silver, verses 11, 2021, righteous speech is a fountain of life, v11. Think about a fountain in an arid landscape. It nourishes, refreshes, sustains life. The words of the righteous don't just convey information, they bring vitality. They encourage, they instruct, they heal. They provide direction when someone is lost, comfort when someone is hurting, truth when someone is confused. The tongue of the righteous is choice silver, valuable, precious, refined through fire to remove all impurities, v20. It's a currency of trust. When they speak, people listen because they've proven themselves reliable. Their words carry weight not because of their volume or their cleverness, but because of their consistent character. Their lips feed many. They are shepherds of souls through their words, v21. Think about the people in your life whose words have nourished you. The teacher whose encouragement came at just the right moment. The friend whose counsel guided you through a difficult decision. The mentor whose wisdom helped you avoid a destructive path. This is righteous speech in action. The concealed violence, verse 11b, contrast. The wicked's mouth conceals violence. On the surface, their words might sound reasonable, even pleasant. But underneath, there's a destructive intent. Their heart is violent, and thus their speech becomes a weapon, even when it doesn't sound like one. Their heart and thus their speech is of little worth. Fools die for lack of sense, often because they refuse the wise words offered to them, v21. Speech here is literally a matter of life and death. Words can guide someone toward flourishing or toward destruction. The refusal to listen to wisdom, the rejection of righteous speech, becomes a form of self-destruction. The ethics of verbal restraint, verse 19, the practical ethics of speech are stunning. Verse 19 is absolutely central. When words are many, transgression is not lacking, but whoever restrains his lips is prudent. Read that again slowly. When words are many, transgression is not lacking. This is mathematical. More talk equals more risk of sin. Why? Because the more we talk, the more likely we are to say something false, speak out of turn, reveal information that should remain confidential, make promises we can't keep, exaggerate for effect, speak from emotion rather than wisdom, gossip or slander, interrupt someone who has something important to say. Verbal restraint is identified here as a primary moral virtue. The wise store up knowledge, v14. They listen more than they speak. They reflect before they respond. They speak with precision and purpose. The fool's mouth, by contrast, runs toward ruin. They talk constantly, fill every silence, process their thoughts out loud, dominate conversations. And in doing so, they inevitably transgress. They sin with their words because the sheer volume guarantees it. Malicious speech, verse 18. Verse 18 targets two specific forms of malicious speech. Whoever conceals hatred with lying lips and whoever utters slander is a fool. Notice both are labeled folly, not just wickedness, but foolishness. Why? Because in a moral universe, deceit and malice are inherently self-destructive strategies. The first type, concealing hatred with lying lips. This is the person who smiles to your face while harboring resentment, who says everything is fine when they're actually bitter, who pretends to support you while secretly undermining you. This always comes out eventually, and when it does, the liar is exposed and trust is destroyed. The second type, uttering slander. Spreading false or damaging information about someone. This destroys the speaker's credibility even more than it damages the victim. Why? Because communities that value wisdom eventually recognize and isolate slanderers. Both forms of malicious speech fracture the trust that communities are built on, and in fracturing that trust, they ultimately destroy the speaker's own standing. The wisdom of covering offense, verse 12. Here's a verse that gets quoted in the New Testament. Hatred stirs up strife, but love covers all offenses. This doesn't mean ignoring serious wrongdoing or enabling abuse. It means that love doesn't broadcast every slight, doesn't amplify every mistake, doesn't keep a running tab of wrongs. Love has the wisdom to know when to address an issue directly and privately, and when to simply let it go. Hatred, by contrast, does the opposite. It looks for reasons to create conflict. It magnifies offenses. It brings up past issues that were supposedly resolved. It ensures that every mistake becomes a public matter. Peter later quotes this principle: "Love covers a multitude of sins," 1 Peter 4:8. This is wisdom about the speech we withhold. The decision not to speak can be just as morally significant as the decision to speak. The ultimate verdict on speech, verses 31-32. The speech unit culminates in verses 31-32. "The mouth of the righteous brings forth wisdom, but the perverse tongue will be cut out. The lips of the righteous know what is acceptable, but the mouth of the wicked what is perverse." Their speech is fitting, timely, constructive. They have what we might call emotional and social intelligence. They know what to say and when to say it. They understand context. They read the room. They consider the impact of their words before releasing them. The perverse tongue, it will be cut out, a vivid metaphor for its ultimate silencing and irrelevance. In the end, deceptive and destructive speech cancels itself out. People stop listening. The speaker loses their platform. Their words carry no weight. Righteous speech endures and shapes generations. Corrupt speech is eventually muted, forgotten, or actively suppressed. Section V. Security, destiny, and divine justice, the path of integrity, verse 9. "Whoever walks in integrity walks securely, but he who makes his ways crooked will be found out." Walking in integrity, or uprightly as some translations render it, means walking in security. Why? Because you have nothing to hide. Your life is transparent. You don't have to remember which lies you told to which people. You don't have to maintain a false image. You don't live in fear of being discovered. The crooked path is inherently unstable. You're constantly looking over your shoulder, managing your image, covering your tracks, and the proverb declares with confidence, "You will be found out." It's not a matter of if, but when. The truth has a way of emerging. Reality has a way of asserting itself. Modern examples are everywhere. The politician whose corruption is eventually exposed, the business leader whose fraud comes to light, the person whose double life is revealed. The crooked path always leads to discovery. Teachability and life, verse 17. Verse 17 ties security to teachability. "Whoever heeds instruction is on the path to life, but he who rejects reproof leads others astray." The way of life isn't a secret. It's revealed through correction and wisdom, but it requires a teachable spirit, the humility to accept correction, to admit you don't know everything, to adjust your course when shown a better way. Refusing correction is choosing to wander off the map. And worse, he who rejects reproof leads others astray. Your stubbornness doesn't just harm you, it misleads everyone who follows your example or takes your advice. The Eschatological Horizon, verses 24-25, 27-30. Here is the chapter's Eschatological Horizon, its view of the final outcome, the ultimate destination of different paths. "The wicked live with a dread that will eventually overtake them," v. 24. "They are like a passing whirlwind, all noise and fury, impressive for a moment, then gone without a trace," v. 25. "The righteous are an everlasting foundation, stable, enduring, permanent." This plays out both in the short term and eternally. "The fear of the Lord prolongs life, but the years of the wicked will be short," v. 27. Alignment with reality, with the moral architecture of the universe, promotes flourishing and longevity. Resistance to that architecture brings premature destruction. "The hope of the righteous ends in joy, the expectation of the wicked will perish," v. 28. Their anticipations lead to different destinations. The righteous person's expectations are anchored in the architect of the system, in God himself. The wicked person's expectations, built on false foundations, ultimately collapse. The final declaration, verses 29-30, the final declaration of the chapter. "The way of the Lord is a stronghold to him whose way is blameless, but destruction to evildoers. The righteous will never be removed, but the wicked will not dwell in the land." God's way isn't just morally right, it's a fortress. It provides protection, security, a stronghold in times of trouble. But to those who oppose it, that same immovable reality becomes the rock they crash against. The system that protects the righteous destroys the wicked, not through God's arbitrary punishment, but through the natural consequences of living against the grain of reality. The system guarantees permanence for the righteous. They will never be removed. The wicked, they will not dwell in the land. They are ultimately aliens in the moral universe they reject. They have no permanent place in a reality they refuse to align with. Section VI, Canonical links in the greater fulfillment. Proverbs 10 doesn't exist in a vacuum. Its principles echo through Scripture and find their ultimate fulfillment in Christ. Speech in the heart. Jesus affirms the diagnostic principle we've seen throughout this chapter. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Matthew 12:34. Your words reveal your character because they flow from your inner life. The solution isn't just to control your tongue, it's to transform your heart. Love covering offenses. The call for love to cover all offenses, v12, is quoted by Peter. Above all, love each other deeply because love covers a multitude of sins, 1 Peter 4:8. This principle of gracious discretion becomes a defining mark of Christian community. The righteous and the wicked. Paul's extended treatment in Romans 1:3 echoes these themes. The wicked suppress truth, their minds become futile, they receive the consequences of their choices. But God's righteousness is revealed, a righteousness available through faith in Christ. Christ is the fulfillment. Ultimately, Christ is seen as the fulfillment of this entire blueprint. He is the perfect incarnate Word, the fountain of life, whose every utterance was grace and truth. His speech was always fitting, always true, always life-giving. He is the truly righteous one whose memory is an eternal blessing. Through union with him, believers are empowered to walk this path, to speak life instead of death, to work diligently with integrity, to build on the foundation that cannot be shaken. The Holy Spirit transforms our hearts so that our words, our work, and our ways increasingly align with the grain of God's universe. Section VII, Application and Final Challenge. So what is Proverbs Chapter 10? It is not a magical promise of trouble-free living. It doesn't guarantee that following these principles will make you wealthy, popular, or comfortable. What it is, the revelation of the deep moral architecture of God's world. It asserts that righteousness, diligence, truthful speech, and integrity are not just good ideas or arbitrary religious rules. They are the fundamental codes for human flourishing within that architecture. The wicked, the lazy, the deceitful, the gossip, they are not just breaking rules. They are quite literally building their lives on a fault line in a universe that will not ultimately sustain it. They are swimming against the current of reality itself. Practical application for today. Let me make this intensely practical. Look at your life right now. In your work, are you the diligent person who understands the seasons, or are you sleeping during harvest? Are you the sluggard who irritates everyone around you, or are you reliable? In your speech, are you the person who speaks too much, guaranteeing transgression, or are you learning the power of restraint? Do your words build up or tear down? Do you cover offenses with love or broadcast them with hatred? In your relationships, are your choices making your father glad and your mother sorrowful? Is your character building a legacy that will bless others or a reputation that will rot? In your finances, are you pursuing shortcuts and ill-gotten gains or building wealth through diligence and integrity? Does your money come with sorrow or with blessing? In your character, are you teachable or do you reject correction? Are you walking in integrity with nothing to hide, or on a crooked path that will eventually be exposed? The ultimate question, the challenge of Proverbs 10 is this: will you align your life with the grain of the universe, or will you spend your life splintering yourself against it? The choice, as this chapter makes devastatingly clear, determines everything from your daily peace to your relationships, from your material provision to your lasting legacy, from your temporal security to your eternal destination. This isn't about legalism or earning God's favor through perfect performance. It's about recognizing reality for what it is and choosing to live accordingly. It's about understanding that God's wisdom isn't arbitrary restriction but loving guidance toward the life you were designed to live. A call to wisdom. The architecture is already in place. The moral order exists whether you acknowledge it or not. The question is whether you'll work with it or against it. Will you be the wise son or the foolish son? Will you gather in summer or sleep through harvest? Will your tongue be choice silver or concealed violence? Will your memory be a blessing or will your name rot? Will you be the everlasting foundation or the passing whirlwind? What will you build? If this deep dive into Proverbs 10 has challenged you, encouraged you, or opened your eyes to the moral architecture of God's universe, please like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. We're going to continue verse by verse through the Proverbs, unpacking the wisdom that has shaped civilizations and transformed countless lives. Leave a comment below which verse from this chapter hit you the hardest. What area of your life is God calling you to align with His wisdom? Remember, wisdom is calling out. The question is whether you'll answer. Until next time, walk wisely, speak life, and build your legacy on the unshakable foundation of God's truth. God bless you.
Have you ever wished life came with, a practical instruction manual? Not for the big, dramatic moments, but for all the little daily choices that really end up shaping our lives. Well, that's kind of what Proverbs 10 is all about. It's not some high-minded philosophy. Think of it more like a collection of ancient life hacks, laying out two very different paths, built one small decision at a time.
Right out of the gate, the chapter kicks off with a truth that's pretty universal, isn't it? But this isn't just about making your parents proud. It's really about the core idea that our choices have these ripple effects, creating either joy or sorrow for the people closest to us. So this first verse, it really sets the stage for the whole chapter, a series of direct, side-by-side comparisons showing how our character impacts everyone around us. So this first verse, it really sets the stage for the whole chapter.
So, that leads us to the big question we're going to tackle. If life really is a choice between these two roads, what are the actual signposts? What are we supposed to look for? We're going to dig right into the text and uncover the specific choices it highlights in three key areas: our work, our words, and ultimately the legacy we leave behind.
All right, so here we are at a fork in the road. After 9 chapters of some pretty broad principles, the advice is about to get super practical and personal.
And the first major split in that path, it all comes down to how we handle our work and our wealth, what the text basically presents as the very foundation of a life. Wow, notice how stark and unapologetic this is? There's really no room for excuses here. Diligence, a focused, active hand, is shown as the direct cause of prosperity. But on the flip side, the slack hand isn't just about being lazy. It's about a lack of attention, a lack of care that just inevitably leads to poverty. It's pure cause and effect. This farming metaphor is just timeless, right? Summer is any season of opportunity in our lives. You know, a new project, a chance to learn something, a window to invest. The wise person sees that season and they act. The fool, though, he sleeps during the harvest. He misses that critical moment, not just out of laziness, but from a total lack of awareness. It's a really powerful warning about the hidden cost of doing nothing. But here's where it gets really interesting, because it's not just about your bank account. The text suggests the real payoff is internal. Virtuous work actually shapes who you are. It sharpens your mind, it builds your self-discipline, and it makes your downtime feel genuinely restful because you've earned it. It's about finding purpose not just in the outcome, but in the effort itself. Okay, so from what we do, the text shifts to what we say. And here, the fork in the road is just as clear. Our words have the power to either build a world or to completely shatter it. The text introduces this fascinating character, the prating fool. Now, this isn't just someone who talks a lot. It's someone whose words are totally empty because they aren't backed up by action or by any willingness to learn. You know, think of that person who has an opinion on everything but never actually listens to advice. They just talk, and in the end, their speech is completely worthless. The imagery here is so powerful. On one side, you've got a well of life, words that genuinely refresh people, that sustain them. But on the other, you have a mouth that conceals violence. This suggests words that are kind of like a trap, hiding aggression and bad intentions behind a nice-sounding facade. And check out the subtle shift here. For the just person, their tongue, their speech, is valuable, like choice silver. But for the wicked person, the text goes deeper, straight to the heart. It says their inner character itself is what's worthless. The insight is pretty profound. Valuable words can only come from a valuable source. This verse just drills down to the root cause. What's the engine that's driving our words? Hatred, the text says, is basically a conflict machine. It's always looking to stir up strife. But love does the exact opposite. It's a force for reconciliation, for absorbing offenses instead of blowing them up. It's the ultimate litmus test for the heart we were just talking about. So we've seen the daily choices in our actions and our words. Now let's zoom out. What's the long-term impact? What's the actual shape of the memory you leave behind? The contrast here could not be more intense. The memory of a just person is a blessing. Their influence continues to bring good into the world long after they're gone. But the name of the wicked, it simply rots. I mean, just like something organic, it decays, it putrefies, and eventually it just disappears into nothing, maybe leaving a bad smell behind. You know, a commentator named Arnott gives us this incredible image to help us understand that legacy. Picture a dry, barren, sun-scorched mountain. A single well, a single righteous life, doesn't just exist for itself, it creates a belt of green all around it. It nourishes, it sustains, and it brings life and color to an otherwise empty landscape. That's the lasting impact of a good person.
So how does this blessed memory actually work in practice? Well, the text suggests a few ways. First, goodness is kind of contagious, right? It inspires other people to copy it. Second, it leaves behind a fragrance, a positive atmosphere that hangs around long after they're gone. And amazingly, a life well lived can even reduce the fear of death for others, just by lighting up the path ahead.
All right, we've walked both paths, and we've seen the legacies they leave. Now for the final test. What happens when the storm hits? This is the ultimate stress test. When the whirlwind of life hits, and it always does, the wicked person is totally passive. They are simply blown away, gone. But look at the righteous person. They aren't just standing on a foundation. Their character has made them become the foundation. They are solid, stable, and completely unmovable. This final contrast is just profound. It suggests that the way of the Lord, or you could say the fundamental nature of reality, is a constant. It doesn't change. What changes is our relationship to it. For the upright person, that same reality feels like a fortress of strength. But for the wicked, that exact same reality feels like pure destruction. It's not that the world is different, it's that they are. So after all of these contrasts, in our work, our words, and our legacy, the choice becomes incredibly personal, doesn't it? Proverbs has laid out two blueprints. The only question left is, which one are you building with, the choices you're making today?